So, good morning, everyone. My name is Benjamin. I'm the SPC here at the center, and so we're very happy to welcome Reverend Hollis Walker for today's educational seminar talk on dementia training, learning to recognize the signs of dementia, learning how to be helpful to people who we suspect might have dementia or we know have dementia. So very timely, useful information. So thank you so much for your time and your effort today. Over to you.
Now I'm on, yes. Sorry about that. It's nice to have you here, all of you who are here on Zoom. Thank you for coming. And those of you who are here in person as well. I haven't been here since the new center was built. I'm embarrassed to say, but it's just beautiful. So I'm really happy for you all. Hey, let's take just 3 deep breaths together. Breathing in calm. Breathing out ease. Breathing in calm. Breathing out ease. Breathing in calm. And breathing out ease. So my name is Hollis Walker. I'm an interfaith minister and board certified chaplain by training. And a Buddhist ally, shall we say. I'm not a full-time Buddhist practitioner, but I definitely have an affinity for especially Tibetan Buddhism. If you came to my house and walked into my foyer, you would see a beautiful Buddhist wall hanging and a photograph of one of the incarnations of the Dalai Lama as a child from a friend of mine. Anyway, so I'm here representing an organization called the Memory Care Alliance. It was founded here in Santa Fe, and the organization's sole purpose is to support people and educate people about dementia. And so most of what we do, and I'm just a volunteer for the organization, most of what we do is run support groups for people with dementia and their caregivers. We do trainings for family or other caregivers of people with dementia. And we do this here in Santa Fe on a regular basis and elsewhere all around the state. And the organization is growing quite quickly along with these issues. So I am not an expert on dementia. I do have quite a bit of experience. My father had dementia and he died of it. My mother had Parkinson's disease, which, as some of you may know, is a link to a specific kind of dementia. And I have worked in hospital and hospice settings very much with a lot of people with various kinds of dementia. And so in that respect, I have a lot of experience, but I'm not a medical professional or any kind of expert, really. So what this program is called is Dementia Friends, and it's a program that arose out of the UK. And the idea was we need to raise awareness and educate the community about dementia more than we already know. And some of you guys may know a lot about dementia already, but maybe there'll be some kernel in what I have to offer that will be new for you. Talking about dementia is really difficult. Let me ask you guys to throw out words. When you think of dementia, what do you think of? Loss. Yes. What else?
Prevention.
Confusion. Yeah. Anyone else? Anybody on Zoom want to?
Prevention.
Going in? Fear. Yeah. Yeah. So all of these words are negative, right? It's hard to attach anything positive to the words that we've just said. And yet there's one there are lots of people with dementia can have full and happy lives, and their family members and caregivers can as well. But there's one curious thing about dementia that is quite beautiful, and it relates directly to Buddhism, and that's that the person with dementia over time comes to the point usually where they are living entirely in the present moment. And how hard do we struggle to stay in the present moment? And it's an amazing thing to really spend time with someone who is in that place of right now. It's all right now. I don't know. I used to ask my mother, "Hey, mom, how was lunch?" And she'd say, "So so. I don't know." She didn't remember what she'd eaten 5 minutes before, right? But she was right now with me. Um, and so the opportunity to be with someone for whom life is only right now is an amazing
here.
opportunity.
Come here. Come here. Hey.
I so so
Get out of there.
the fact about dementia is that now that the National Institutes of
No.
Health say that 1 in 7 Americans 71 or older has dementia. 1 in 7 Americans. So even if we don't know, we know someone with dementia, we probably do, right? I've only given this presentation 3 times, so I still have to look at my notes a lot. Yeah. Yes, I do. I certainly do. Thank you. Helping me out here. Let me get that. Where's the, here we go. Thank you very much, Space. So dementia is not one specific disease. It's a constellation of diseases. Dementia is just an umbrella term for dementia. The most common form of dementia is Alzheimer's disease, which may represent 60 to 80% of dementias, but there are other kinds. I mentioned my mother having Parkinsonian dementia. There's also Lewy body dementia and vascular dementia, and you've probably heard of all of them. Every person with dementia is unique. The way the illness represents itself in them is unique, but there are certain similarities for most people. It's mainly associated with a decline in memory and other thinking skills that are enough to reduce an individual's ability to function in daily life, right? We used to call this senility. My great-grandfather had dementia, but we didn't even have the word then. We called him senile. And by the time I met him, all he could do was sit and listen to baseball on the radio. And one of the first times I realized something was not right with him was when he locked my sister and I, who were probably 5 and 8, locked us in the living room. And later my parents had to explain he didn't really understand that we were too young to be locked in the living room. Now I can laugh about it, but these things are tough. There are differences between normal aging and dementia. Okay, so most people have physical changes as they age. We all know that. We wake up stiff. We have white hair like me. We find out we don't remember names as easily, right? That's a very common one. You know, your neighbor comes over and you're like, "Hi." You know, you're wishing someone would come out or a voice would whisper in your ear who it is. We all do that. But for people with dementia, it's different. And I want to talk about some of those differences and how they might present themselves. One is just simple memory loss that disrupts daily life, forgetting recently learned information, especially. People with dementia may remember the long ago past. They may remember how to do things from long ago, depending on where they are on the trajectory of the disease. But you know, those asking the same question over and over again, forgetting and not being able to remember, those kinds of things are associated with dementia. You and I might forget an appointment, we might forget a name, but we'll remember it in a little while, right? The second sign of dementia is challenges in planning or solving problems. And they give very, very sort of sexist examples in here. But for example, a woman or a man might not be able to follow a recipe anymore, even though they've made that same recipe hundreds of times over the course of their lives. They just can't do the step-by-step thing. May not be able to pay bills. Bills and other things that come in the mail may start piling up on the table. They have difficulty completing what we would think are familiar tasks. Trouble driving, getting in the car, and they're going to go to their daughter's house, but they can't remember where it is, or the grocery store. I remember my dad once saying he was going to the gas station, and we watched the car go back and forth because he couldn't remember where it was, you know. Confusion with time or place. If you go to any kind of memory care center or daycare center for seniors, you'll no doubt see a whiteboard, and it will say, what day is it? What time is it? The weather is, because there's a lack of inability to orient in time and space anymore. And now a lot of retired people do that. You know, they aren't going anywhere every day, so you say, what day is it? And they say, Tuesday? Is it Tuesday? But the fact is they'll remember it's Tuesday, right, in a minute. Whereas a person with dementia will not. Neurologists typically do little tests with people and ask them things like, what day is it? What year is it? Who is the president? Very simple questions that none of us even think about. The person with dementia starts to lose the ability to hang on to those bits of data. Trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. People having vision problems is sometimes a sign of Alzheimer's, especially anything new and different than is normal vision problems. Like most older people will get cataracts if they're lucky enough to live long enough. That's normal, you know, but these kinds of vision problems that come up with dementia are not. New problems with words and speaking and writing. In Parkinsonian dementia, especially, people get microphagia. Doesn't matter what their writing looked like at one time, it becomes teeny weeny, you know, little tiny and very difficult to read. I was with a friend the other day whom I suspect has early mild dementia, woman with a PhD, very intelligent, lived all over the world. And in the course of our conversation, she was replacing words with incorrect words. Instead of saying evasive, she said invasive. Instead of saying fiscal, meaning money, she said physical. And you know, that little red flag went off in my head. Yes. No, she didn't. Mm-mm. Mm-hmm. You know, we can talk about that. Yeah. It's a difficult situation at best. Um, yeah. Let's do that in a little bit. Struggling with vocabulary, not being able to come up with a word for something, calling that thing up there a wall watch instead of a clock, or this a hand clock instead of a watch, you know, not being able to come up with the word, so making up words or a string of words to explain what we mean, which is actually what we all do sometimes, right? But people with Alzheimer's or some kind of dementia do that more frequently. Decreased or poor judgment. They may use poor judgment when dealing with money, giving large amounts to telemarketers. They may pay less attention to grooming or keeping themselves clean. If you go to any memory care unit, you will find caregivers who are using all kinds of tricks to talk a person with dementia into having a shower. The simplest things. I'm watching a friend of mine right now who is stopping shaving. And this is not a man who ever wanted to have a beard, you know, but he's just not doing it anymore. And that's, to me, that's an interesting thing to watch and to see. misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. And that's a big one. I mean, I'm pretty organized. I don't lose things often. But when I do, I can use my rational mind to say, okay, did I have my phone when I came in the house? Did I call it? No, I didn't. When did I last have my phone? Oh, I was in the car. It's probably in the cup holder in the car, right? And I can go back and find it. The person with dementia can't do that. And they may put things in places where they don't belong. And for a family member or caregiver, this can be really difficult and distressing, especially when it's important things like wallets and keys and things like that. They withdraw from social events. One of my good friends has her mother is living in a retirement community. I'm not even sure she's diagnosed with dementia, but she will no longer leave her room, even to go out with her daughters. She's perfectly physically capable. She won't go to the dining room to eat. She makes them bring her food to them. And, there could be many reasons for that. The most obvious reason, especially in early dementia, is that the person is aware that they're losing capability and they're embarrassed. They don't want to go out in public and have people see them make mistakes. And they may be also avoiding the anxiety that can come with not knowing, will I be able to be okay? So all those things. Um, Changes in mood and personality. People with dementia can become confused, suspicious, depressed, fearful, and anxious. They can be easily upset at home, at work, with friends, or in places where they're out of their comfort zone. And sort of the stereotypical thing is the person whose personality seems to entirely change. Um, my father went through a period of time where he was enraged all the time, enraged, said the most horrible, frightening, unkind things to my mother, who was his primary caregiver. And then, thankfully, after a few years, that went away, and this docile, kind, loving person emerged. And he was never docile, loving, and kind, but neither was he full of rage. He was going through stages of being a different person as his brain changed. Um, yeah. And so, where's that? My 10? That's my 10. So it's important for us to remember that everyone's brain is different, and how dementia may present itself can be different. But there's a little story in here that's a good example it's about a woman with a bookcase. She has a bookcase, and in the top of her bookcase are all the facts that she knows in her life, her memories of the past, how to get places, how to cook that recipe, all those executive function things. And then further down in the bookcase is where the feelings and the emotions of her life reside. And dementia is like someone has come and shaken that bookcase. And which books are going to fall off first? The ones that are high up, right? If you've ever knocked over a bookcase, I have done that. The book's on top. So the facts and the memories and the how to get somewhere, that stuff is what goes first for most people with dementia. But the feelings and emotions often last longer. And so that's important to remember as we try to figure out how to communicate with and support people who have dementia, is that they may not remember who you are or what they're doing in the moment, but they still have feelings. We need to remember that. So it's important to remember that dementia is not just about memory problems. It's about having, I'm sorry, dementia is not just what? It's not just memory, right? It's also functional abilities. It's a lot of different things, and it can present differently for different people. And it can include physical impacts as well. It is possible, as we said before, to have a good quality of life with dementia, and that depends more on the people who are around you than on anything else. There is more to a person than the disease. That's that fifth message we were talking about before. We don't identify We don't identify our friend by saying, "Oh, that's Susie. She has diabetes." You know, we don't do that, right? We think of our friend, and we may always be aware that they have a particular illness or disability or problem that we need to be aware of. We don't identify them that way. Dementia isn't an all-defining disease, right? People are more than their disease. So when we get close to the end of this session, I'm going to ask you guys if you will think about what you can do differently in your day to be supportive of anyone you know with dementia or their family or friends, whoever their caregivers are. And so just to put some things in your brain to think about. One is if you know someone in your community who has dementia, someone who lives nearby or that you see on a regular basis, think about how you might be able to help them. Maybe you take them a meal once in a while. Maybe you offer to spell their caregiver so that the caregiver can get out of the house and just have a break. Um, Maybe if you're in a store or a shop, I see this all the time, where a person is clearly struggling with something, to have the courage to say, "Hey, can I help you find that? It seems like there's a whole lot of that same thing here." In other words, in a kind and not critical way, to just offer to help. I did it yesterday with a lady. We were both waiting in line at Walgreens to get prescriptions, and she was looking at all the ankle braces, um, and so we went through all the ankle braces together, and we had a lovely time. It was really nice. It's as we all know, doing things for other people is more gratifying for us, right? It's really all about me. Also, just telling other people what you've learned about dementia and how you can help people and be supportive. Let's go back to that 70-year-old lady with dementia that has the bookcase. A daughter may visit to find that her mother can no longer remember her name. She will, however, remember feelings of love, comfort, and support from the visit. Similarly, if the mother and daughter were to argue, the mother might not remember the details, but she will remember the feelings of anger and hurt from that exchange. Um, One of my dearest friend's mother died of Alzheimer's, and in the last years of her life, she could no longer recognize her daughter. She called her that nice girl who takes me for rides. And it was okay. It was just fine. She took her for rides in her car and they had a nice talk, and it was as good as it could be under the circumstances. And her mother came home having had a wonderful ride in the car. I saw the beach. I saw the mountains. So as the dementia continues, a woman like that might lose other thinking skills. She might not be able to manage finances, complete activities she once enjoyed, or communicate with family and friends. Um, one of the These days, one of the most obvious signs that someone may have dementia to me is when they can no longer use their phone, whether it's a smartphone or a flip phone. Almost all people who have cognitive decline that's serious will someday not be able to use their phone. My mother used to text me all the time, call me on the phone. She could no longer even answer, even push talk on her phone at some point. So for people with dementia, the most recent memories are lost first. Memories from earlier in life are remembered longer. That's a generalization, but in my experience, it's mostly true. So, well, as I said, she couldn't tell you what she ate 5 minutes ago, even if the plate was still in front of her. Um, but I could ask her questions or try to engage her about her childhood. She could remember things like that. Not always. One time I asked her, "Did you have a wood stove in your house?" And she thought for a minute. She said, "You know what, honey? I don't remember." Um, but other things she would remember, her dog Buster, whatever. So we could engage together on, things that were important to her at one time. Um, we use planning to carry out all of our everyday activities. And there are so many things that take planning. Everything we do has multiple steps. Um, and so, another thing that people fail to be able to do is something like using a computer, which is a completely binary step-by-step thing to do. But if you're having trouble with the steps, you're not going to be able to do that. Um, Judgment is a skill we use to keep ourselves safe or to interact with other. And a person with dementia may give money to anyone who calls and asks for money, or may loudly criticize people in a social setting, or say inappropriate things. I have known people with dementia who never in their lives, when their brain was functioning properly, would have ever said anything racist. And out of their mouths came the most horrible language, which can be really difficult for a family member or caregiver to deal with, right? And the person has no awareness that they're saying inappropriate things, right? So I want us to do a little exercise together. This is usually pretty fun. It's can we write a step-by-step list of how to do something, some simple task. We could do brushing your teeth. We could do making a sandwich. What sounds like fun? Let's brush teeth. Okay, so you're with Dad, and Dad doesn't remember things like how to brush teeth anymore. So how do we deal with that? What do we say? One thing we can do, one easy way to deal with this kind of situation is not to say, "Hi, Dad, you want to brush your teeth?" But to say, "Dad, let's go brush your teeth," or "We're going to brush your teeth." And then for our learning here about how hard it actually is to brush your teeth, what's the first thing you do if you're going to brush your teeth? Number one. Yes, we're going to pick up the toothbrush, but we're going to go way backwards. Did somebody in there say something else? We're going to.
I said pick up
Where to
the
go?
toothbrush, son.
Yes. Where are we going? Let's go in the bathroom. So we've got to know where to go. And when we get in there, what are we going to do? Let's gather the tools. Maybe I would go so far as to say, turn on the light. Hey, Dad, turn on the light. 3, gather the tools. So what do we need? Yeah. So we're at least up to 4 things that we need, right? Just to brush teeth. And then what are we going to do? Now you're getting it. Yeah, it's like so many steps. Open the tube, right? And then
We can't hear the steps. I'm sorry. We're not hearing the steps.
oh, I'm sorry. I said, so because other people are speaking and you're not hearing. And we said, where are we going? Like, let's go to the bathroom. We're going to turn on the light. We're going to gather the tools, toothbrush, maybe floss, water in a cup, maybe the toothpaste. We're going to open the tube. What's next? Squeeze the toothpaste? Yeah, squeeze the toothpaste. And then
Put it on the brush.
yeah, very good.
Squeezing it alone means it could go anywhere.
So
we want to
put the toothbrush in your hand is the prior stage, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then squeeze the toothpaste on the toothbrush, right? I mean, we don't even think about these things. We do them without thinking at all, right? So now you got toothpaste on a toothbrush. Now what are you going to do? Right? This He said that's where it gets complicated, right? And helping someone to brush their teeth, if you've ever had a child and tried to do that, it's not as easy as it sounds. But yeah, you're going to help that person put the toothbrush in their mouth and move it back and forth or up and down on one side. And then let's do the other side. Then let's do the front. Let's do the inside. You know, this could take 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It's not easy, you know, to help someone do something so simple. Then you're done. He's done brushing his teeth. What are you going to do? rinse or just spit first, maybe? So spit all that toothpaste out. Okay, Dad. Now let's rinse. Let's get that. Pick up the glass with the water, take a sip, put the glass down, right? Swish it in our mouth. Okay, you can spit it out now. And like classic thing to happen with somebody who has dementia is they might just sit there and swish. You might have to say, okay, now spit it out, right? So um, staying with each tiny little thing in the moment, one step at a time, uh, to get through with this. So you spit, and then there's the cleanup. We don't have to go into too much detail, but you can see there could be 20 more steps of detail of just putting the top of the tube, putting it back, rinsing off the toothbrush, rinsing out the cup, all of the wiping off the mouth. You know, it takes many, many steps to do things. And this is why it's so hard for people who are having cognitive problems, just to remember all those steps. So, um, well, it's good to remember that. And it's actually very helpful to write down steps. If you're working or dealing with somebody who has dementia, sit down, take 5 minutes and try to write down all the steps that it might take to do something before you try to assist them in doing it. But what's the point? What's the point of helping them do something like brush their teeth or empty the trash or any of those tasks? It's not really the task itself. It's empowering them to be able to do something productive for themselves, to take care of themselves, to be useful to the household if it's something that helps everyone, like emptying the trash, right? So helping people do things as long as they can is really important, not taking away from them just because it takes so long and it's so irritating, but to help them do whatever they can. Um, so let's see, the tiny steps and the support. Oh yeah, it's just there's a little list I'd written down here of all the skill sets it takes to do a task like brush your teeth. You have to plan it. There's sequencing, right? You have to do A before B. There's recall. You got to remember how to do certain things. You have to use your vision to find things and put them to work. You have to have alternatives, alternative plans. You have to use time management. All of these skills are things that we use without thinking to accomplish tasks. Yeah, please.
Both of my parents had dementia, so I'm very familiar with that. I happen to know there's 3 of us here who have the same friend who is just starting into dementia. She can do anything, but she will talk to you for 20 minutes on the phone about something, and 2 hours later call up and say, oh, we have to talk about this.
Yes.
So this is a much different, how do we say, oh, you already said that, or we did that, or I think that's what we're kind of looking at, right?
Yeah, I think, you know, when it's a short-term thing, like they just say the same thing once or ask the same question again, once or twice, it's no big deal. It's when they call you again and want to tell you the same 30-minute story and, you know, you really can't do it. And I think, you know, compassionate honesty is the best we can hope for. Oh, Dottie, you told me that story, remember? Just kind of, you know, comfortably, naturally reminding them that you've heard that story before. They may want to tell you anyway, you know, and that's not easy. It is so difficult to listen to the same things over and over again, especially questions. But there's no simple answer to those questions. A lot of the time, if someone's in your presence, distraction is the key. Oh, I'm so glad you could just interrupting him and say, I'm so glad you're here. These new flowers are blooming in the garden. Let's go outside and look at them. And just because often with people with dementia, all you got to do is get them on another track. And so that can be helpful. It's a little harder when you're talking to somebody on the phone, unless you want to say, oh, wait, there's something really important I need to tell you right now before I forget. And then you tell them a story. So, yeah, no hard and fast black and white answers. I hope that's a little bit helpful. Yeah. Uh,
Um, what if, it's like I want to spend some time with this person.
Uh-huh.
Okay? I mean, yeah, but when I spend time with people normally, I chat with them
Mhm.
and what if they can't remember enough words to sustain that sort of a conversation?
Mhm.
It's uncommon. I want to provide, to give some company
Mhm.
and, but I don't do it because I don't want to end up in that situation, that position where they're trying to uphold a conversation and they can't.
Mhm.
And that's frustrating for them. And I don't know how to be with a person
Right.
uh, in another way.
Yeah. This is an extraordinary lesson for all of us. It is very difficult for most of us to just be quiet with someone, to let go of the idea that we have to have a conversation at all, to be able to say, I'd really just love to sit here with you. It's important for me to be with you. Um, Sometimes, just doing that is fine, giving the person permission not to talk. We don't have to talk. We can just sit here with each other. We can practically read each other's minds anyway. Um, with some people that I've known with dementia, I have done physical things for them because the older we get and the more isolated we are, the less we are touched by another human being. And there's nothing so healing and connecting as touch. So, hey, you want a shoulder rub? I'm feeling like a shoulder rub today. Um, Putting lotion on somebody's hands, brushing their hair, all those simple things that we might do. Now, if you don't have that kind of intimacy with your friend, you might feel uncomfortable about it at first, but you can offer and see what they say. I cannot tell you, a time has never gone by with some of my elderly friends where I've just sit behind them and just rub their shoulders a little bit. Oh my God, that feels so good. And I can just imagine no one touches them, even like people in a memory care or an assisted living. The only people who touch them are sort of touching them clinically, you know, not just a gentle love touch. So again, these are not easy questions at all. It's difficult to deal with the discomfort that we feel sitting with our own discomfort of being with someone who can no longer communicate with us like they once did. It's tough. I mean, these are the big life lessons, honestly, as far as I'm concerned. I hope that was helpful. So, yeah, what time is it? I don't want to go on too long here. Uh, one of the other things that it's important to know about is that people who have dementia and can't really any longer communicate very well or may not even be available, I mean, not aware of themselves enough, may start lashing out in weird ways, right? Um, and I saw this with my mother. I've seen it with patients where they're so stiff or they have such bad arthritis, for example, that it hurts them to have their arms over their head. And then here's someone trying to yank their arms over their head and put their shirt on, and they're punching. And people are like, why is she punching? What's wrong with her? She's full of rage. Give her drugs. It's like, no, maybe it's not comfortable. Many people who have kinds of dementia, especially late stage dementia, their skin becomes so hypersensitive that they do not want to be touched. This is true of people who are dying often. They do not want to be touched. And you're thinking, they're dying. I want to hold her hand and stroke her arm and they're agitated. And So we have to, try to imagine what's it like to be inside that body right now. I don't know what she's feeling. Maybe this is uncomfortable. I won't do that anymore. Um, and often people will have like rageful reactions to certain people, especially if they're in some sort of facility. And you're thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? She hates that caregiver. Well, maybe that caregiver isn't very caring with her. And, they used to yank my mom. She had Parkinson's. She couldn't move. We'd come in and her arms would be covered with bruises because she was so fragile and they were grabbing her and pulling her, and we had to put up signs and talk to the caregivers and say, don't do that. There are other ways to move her if you have to. So it's good to be really aware of what's going on for people physically as well as mentally. Um, so treat basically, treat the person with dignity and respect. Be aware of your feelings. If you're really just at the end of your rope because they have pushed you there, not on purpose, but they've asked you the same question 40 times. They've broken something, they've lost something, they've done all those things that can happen. It's going to show in your voice. They're going to hear that anger and that anxiety on your part. And so it's really important to be able to take a deep breath and say, okay, let's start this over. We're looking for the keys. Let's talk about where they might be. Let's go around the house. Let's see who can find them first. Find any way to solve the problem without being critical or too controlling. Just being patient and supportive. You know, um, Sometimes people will have hallucinations or weird ideas going on. And our natural instinct is to say, let's say somebody acts paranoid. Well, that man over there, he's trying to come over here and steal our money. I'm just making things up. Don't say, no, he's not. That's all in your mind. Say, well, okay, let's go in the other room. Just enter their world. Don't expect them to enter your world. Enter their world. Try to figure out what's going on. Maybe that person looks scary to them because he looks like somebody from their past. We don't know. Um, but to be curious about what is their experience. My mother saw snakes she had really interesting hallucinations. She saw snakes in the common room of the assisted living where she lived. My mother was terrified of snakes. So she sees a snake in there one day and says she saw a snake. I was like, so Mom, what kind of snake was it? Well, it was brown. Did it have a rattle? No. And we had this long discussion. I just kept asking her questions about the snake. And in the end, I was like, well, were you scared? And she said, no, that little snake didn't want to hurt us. This is big news. Mom's not scared of snakes anymore, right? I said, well, what happened? And she said, well, after a while, he just slithered out the door, and it was a charming conversation. It was entertaining for me, and that way she didn't feel denigrated, like she was wrong or stupid, or that her reality wasn't real. Her reality is just as real as ours, right? It's all illusion. She's just having a different illusion than I am. Just avoid criticizing and correcting. Offer comfort and reassurance. Don't argue. It's just not worth it. It doesn't work. Offer a guess if somebody's trying to communicate with you and you don't know what they want, and they're trying to tell you something. Do you mean you need some water? Would you like to have some water? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Because sometimes people will be able to say yes or no, even though they may not be able to articulate what they want. In advanced stages of cognitive loss, there are these things called communication boards, and they're actually used with a lot of people in hospitals who may be temporarily unable to communicate. Say you're on a ventilator and they want to know what you want. And I brought a couple, I'll pass them around a little bit, where they have pictures so the person can just point to the picture. So there's really simple stuff, really simple ones, yes or no. Here's, for example, here's religious symbols. Would you like to see the priest? Yes or no? This kind of, there are tools that we can use, which may not always work, but sometimes can be very helpful. Yeah, during conversations, provide a statement instead of asking questions. It's like try to remove the phrase, do you remember from your vocabulary, right? Because do you remember inevitably runs into no, which is, uncomfortable, right? For the person who can't remember things they think they should know. But just making statements instead, like I said before about, let's go to the bathroom, Dad. Instead of saying, do you want to go to the bathroom? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Just let's go. We're going. Please come here. Your shower is ready. That kind of thing. Instead of saying, don't go over there, say, let's go over there. Always trying to focus on the positive instead of a negative statement. Give you visual cues, pointing to things, touching things. Why don't you eat that cookie right there? That kind of thing. Point, touch it, give visual cues when you can. You can use pictures and words written down. If people are not able to process what you're saying, you can try that. Yeah, so I want to go over those 5 key messages again. That dementia is not a normal part of aging, it's a disease. It's a big umbrella term for a disease of the brain that affects memory and function, right? It's not just about memory. It usually has to do with other cognitive functions, especially communication. It is possible to have a good quality of life with dementia. And there's more to a person than dementia. People with dementia are valuable to our community. So this program is aimed at turning you all into dementia friends. And all that means is that you're willing to try some different things to be of service to those in the community who have dementia, whether it's a personal friend or just somebody you run into that you think seems to be having trouble with something. They can be really isolated if people around them don't understand what's happening. I got, the other day, a clerk was really, really rude to me in the grocery store, incredibly rude to me. And I was really angry and I had to process it. And later I thought, I realized it felt dehumanizing to me the way this person had treated me. But then I immediately thought of how did she know that I didn't have dementia? How did she know that the reason I was having trouble with my, checkout, my self checkout, wasn't just that I was stupid and didn't get the machine, which is how she was treating me, but maybe I had cognitive problems, right? So just being aware and trying to notice those things and be kind and supportive to people. I often offer people to help people, and sometimes they say no, but it's never wrong to offer. Most people don't get offended. They just say, no, I'm fine, if they are. So we want you to be dementia friends. And so some of the examples of what they hope you will do is, I will stay in touch with someone I know who has dementia. Just staying in touch with them. I will change how I talk about dementia by saying someone is living with dementia, not that they're a victim of dementia or anything like that. I will smile and say hello instead of avoiding looking at someone who may have dementia. Just make eye contact and smile. It takes so little. I will start a conversation at work, at my child's soccer game, or at my faith community about dementia friends and how to become one. So I just want to kind of do, if you don't mind, do a little popcorn thing, go around the room and ask you guys if there's anything, however small, that you can commit to doing to help others in the community who have dementia or who are family and friends of those who have dementia. Anybody on Zoom want to jump in here? Excellent. It is not personal, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sure.
I just said that it's important not to take anything personally.
Right.
I'm just thinking in line with what you, at the very beginning of your presentation, Hollis, you talked about the person living with dementia being in the moment, in the present moment. And as we've been talking and as I reflect on, one particular friend of mine right now has a good amount of dementia, is that I'm also being called to really focus on how do I be in the moment, because there's so many pieces we talked about today. And I'm feeling in my body like doing a Tai Chi dance. Okay, well, let's see, how can I modulate my voice here? How can I be aware of my tendency to want to say, well, you said that already, and instead, just say something calmly. And I'm aware also of tone. That's one of the things that I'm aware of. How we say something is received, I believe, by a person living with dementia as much as the exact words we're saying. That I have to be careful to recognize that this is not a person who's a child.
Right.
That it's very important, especially in this culture, not to infantilize a person who's living with dementia.
Thank you. That's a wonderful point. And even when I'm helping somebody who has dementia, and I'm maybe doing something for them, I'm very aware that they would often rather be doing that themselves. And so to engage them, if they can no longer do the function and I have to do it for them, to engage them and say, here's what I think we should do. Do you think that's the right decision? Of course, it depends, where are they on the scale? Where are they in their progression of dementia? But with people who have mild to moderate dementia, just asking their permission to make a decision for them, or asking, in essence, you're asking their permission to do something for them, can really help them maintain their feeling of dignity. And that's so important. Who else?
I also feel that there's an element of grieving
Oh, yeah.
that goes on with it. If I've known someone a long time and they're a good friend,
Yeah.
and then part of dementia is there's loss of certain abilities or integration of different parts of the self and the brain.
Right.
So there has to be for me, it would have to be an acceptance of my own grieving,
Yep.
while at the same time maintaining the
Mhm.
friendship in a different form.
You really have to be a part psychologist to handle these things, to think about not just how are they doing and am I helping them, but how am I doing? And what is the loss that I'm experiencing? And how do I accept this? There's David Davis, the founder of Memory Care Alliance, cared for his mother with Alzheimer's for 11 years by himself, and then founded this organization. And, we talked a lot about there's the person she was and the person she is now. And they're entirely different people. And how do we accept that? And how do we accept the fact that we have to grieve the loss of the person we knew? Yeah. While we're trying to support and care for them. This is the hardest work. It is the hardest work. And we grow so much when we can hang in there and do it. It's amazing. The personal growth that comes from being with someone who is having cognitive problems. It's just, and we find out how overly focused we are on the rational mind, right? And that everything, it should be, shipshape and top notch and all that. It's like, it's not the way it works. Yeah. I don't want to go over time. I want to ask any of you guys if you have any other ideas about how you might be a dementia friend. Yes.
I'm not a very social person. I'm actually even uncomfortable calling people. But I like email.
Mhm.
Because it's, I can do it when I want and I can receive it when I want.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought it would be really cool, this friend of that we're talking about, that we have, if I could just send emails.
No.
But it's too technical, it's too
Yeah.
complicated.
Mhm.
I mean, and so then I went on a search to find out if there was a really simple email system that was made for people who, you know, could punch 3 buttons and forget the rest. And I couldn't find one. And the one I found, they had discontinued it. They'd stopped it. And I was just wondering, I mean, for all the people that would just really benefit from some simple, really simple electronic communication, is there such a thing?
Yes, there are things like that. There's like a simpler version of a tablet. It's called I think it's called a grandpad, like grandpa pad, that can be used. In my experience, when someone is having trouble, they've gotten to the point where having trouble learning new things, it doesn't matter how simple it is. It just doesn't seem to work. I spent all this time researching telephones with giant numbers on them and a volume control that would let my friends who had hearing problems and some dementia, use the phone, and they couldn't master that phone. So in the end, I found a phone exactly like their old phone that they'd had forever. It had slightly larger buttons, and they were like in heaven, because they remembered how to use that phone, but they could not, even a phone that looked pretty much like their old phone, they couldn't handle the change. So yeah, so I'm not sure there's anything that most people, and the other thing is the window of time during which they might be able to learn that new system and use it could prove to be very small. Now, I will say that some people do okay with Alexa and other devices like that because there's a voice, and they can say, Alexa, call Betty. And as long as they can remember to ask questions like that, they can use it. So that's a good transitional, object for communication for some people. Yeah. Anybody have any other ideas about how they might help people in the community with dementia?
Having patience.
Having patience. Yeah. Really one of the hardest things to do, and yet it's so essential to communicating with someone with dementia. Space.
Well, I just wanted to say that sometimes did find out with my mom and this current friend who actually went to some kind of neurologist who said her dementia is a normal part of, for her age, it's normal. Which says it's not. Anyway, but I found that I can go, and she's, she's very functional,
Yes.
functional still. Because I've known her for 40 years, and I can start talking about one of her kids or grandkids. And then that brings her here, but she can still remember enough to talk about, oh yeah, remember when they were 7 and we did this and that kind of stuff. And I think that's good for her.
Yeah. However you can engage with someone, that's great. And it's important to remember that none of us we can't do this perfectly. There are no perfect rules. Some of the stuff I told you today, you may try it, it might not work. It's all so individual. And I have people I work with on a regular basis who have mild to moderate dementia. And I can't tell you, I go home almost every time and think, oh, I never should have said that. Why did I say that? I should have handled this a different way. But it's not helpful to beat ourselves up. You just have to say, okay, if something like this happens again, I'm going to try this instead, and just accept that we're all fragile, frail human beings and imperfect as all get out, right? Any other last questions? Because I don't want to go over time here. Oh, is there a question up there? Somebody on Zoom have a question?
Hollis, it's
Yes.
Barbara. I'm on Zoom. I have a question.
Okay, Barbara.
And the word that came to my mind initially, when you asked what word comes to mind, mine was prevention. And perhaps this is not your area of expertise, I don't know. Do you have an opinion on adaptogens, for instance, and either preventing or slowing down the process of dementia, or is that not in your purview?
It really isn't in my purview.
Okay.
And all of that stuff is changing so fast. You know, it's sort of like we have to try to keep up with the news, new news that's coming out about new studies and things like that. So I'm sorry, but I don't really have an answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah, I want to tell all the people on Zoom, especially because, there's another question?
Hi, thank you so much for the talk. The more talks like these, the better. I've moved back from Australia to Canada because my mother has Alzheimer's, and yeah, it's been quite a journey. So the more people are talking about it, the better. We do seem a bit behind. So I appreciate the talk today. One thing I want to mention, have you ever heard of the Wicking Institute from the University of Tasmania in Australia?
No, I haven't.
You haven't? Well, if it's appropriate, I think it is appropriate to share, but there's a couple of courses I took even before I came back to help my mom. There's one called Preventing Dementia and one in Understanding It, but it's university courses, but it's free, open online learning. There's no charge to it, but it's a very professional course, but it might be an adjunct to what you taught today. If anyway, if it's appropriate that I share, I was going to share the link in the chat if that's appropriate. But yeah, it's through the University of Tasmania, called the Wicking Institute, and they teach these courses ongoing, and you can take them as many times as you want. Yeah, anyway, I just thought I'd share that with you.
May I ask you to spell the name of the institute?
I sure can. Wicking, WICKING.
Okay, great. I was having trouble hearing you. Thank
It's hard
you.
on Zoom, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
The Wicking Institute.
Wicking Institute.
Yeah,
Excellent.
yeah, and
Great.
I'll put the link
Thank you.
here.
There is a lot of information out there, and I gave everyone here cards for the Memory Care Institute, the Memory Care Alliance. You can also just go to memorycarealliance.org here to find out about the free training classes they have for people who are supporters of those with dementia, and the support groups to go to. They're really, really popular for people who are caring for or have a friend or family member with dementia. So, and you can call the office at any time if you want information about anything related to dementia. They can point you in the right direction. Anything else? Yeah.
Just wanted to say that in addition to the Memory Care Alliance in Santa Fe, there's a socializing group, the Alzheimer's Cafe, that meets once a month at the Children's Museum. It is not an educational event, but I went for several years to just because I had people in my life back then who were living with Alzheimer's. And it's just a nice place for people who have Alzheimer's or people who are allies, friends, caregivers. And it's a very different flavor because it's not educational, but I wanted to just name it for people who are living.
It's the Alzheimer's Cafe. I am not positive they're still doing that.
Oh, I went the other day.
You did good.
Yes.
Well, the Memory Care Alliance also hosts things like that. Like they'll have like a museum outing for caregivers and their family members to go to the O'Keeffe Museum together, for example. And so, yeah, it's important. The socializing, being around other people, very important. Thank you. That was a really good point.
Oh, it meets the second Wednesday of every month at the Children's
I
Museum.
think you can just Google Alzheimer's
It was
Cafe
kind of
Santa
hard
Fe.
to find it the other day.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Yeah, to get the specific, 2 to 4.
Right.
2 to 4 p.m., second Wednesday of each month. And it is called the Alzheimer's Cafe.
Yeah. And probably if you call the Memory Care Alliance, they could probably give you the times and everything like that too. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for being such wonderful participants and putting up with my learning curve here. I appreciate it. If there's any way I can be of service further about this, or you have other questions you want to ask me privately, feel free. You know, I'm glad to give you my phone number and all that. Thank you.
Thank you, Hollis.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sayla, thank you
Thank
from
you, everybody.